Please, daughter, help me. This firewood is so heavy, and I'm so tired.
You dirty, wretched thing! Do you know how much this cloth cost? Do you have any idea who I am? Please, I meant no harm.
They say beauty can be a curse when it becomes a crown too heavy for the heart to bear. In the village of Adisina, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, where the ancient Iroco trees touched the clouds, there lived girls so beautiful that travelers would sometimes lose their way just watching them pass. But beauty, as the elders whispered in worried tones, had poisoned the young women's hearts like honey mixed with bitter herbs. Zara, Nadia, Bella, and a dozen others moved through the village like queens without kingdoms. Their skin glowed with shea butter rubbed into every curve. Their afros rose high and proud, adorned with beads that clicked musical promises with each turn of their heads. Their wrapper cloths were the finest, imported fabrics that cost more than most families earned in a season. The young men of Adisina and neighboring villages would stand slack-jawed at the marketplace, whispering prayers to gods they'd forgotten, hoping for just a smile, just a glance from these magnificent creatures. But the girls knew their worth, and they made everyone pay for it.
Look at these old folks.
They walked past the elderly
Still using
without
the cane,
greeting.
Grandpa?
They shoved aside children playing in their path. They mocked the poor and sneered at anyone who dared suggest they show respect to anyone beyond their own wealthy parents and relatives. The village chief had spoken to their families, but what could he do? Their fathers were the richest men in Adisina, the ones who controlled the trade routes, who owned the largest farms, whose voices carried weight in every decision. Let them be young, the rich fathers would say, waving dismissive hand heavy with gold rings. Beauty is meant to be admired, not hidden behind false humility. And so, the beautiful girls grew more prideful with each passing moon. Among all these peacocks strutted one small, quiet sparrow named Amara. She lived in a mud house at the edge of the village with her father, Papa Chike, a man whose back had bent early from carrying loads for others, whose hands were cracked like dry river beds from work that never quite paid enough. Amara's mother had died bringing her into this world, and Papa Chike had raised his daughter alone, pouring all his love into her like water into parched soil. Amara wore the same 2 wrapper cloths, faded from washing in the stream. Her afro was natural but unadorned, no beads, no thread, no coconut oil to make it shine. She walked barefoot because shoes were a luxury saved for special occasions that never seemed to come. The other girls would pass her and laugh, their voices sharp as broken glass. "Look at poverty itself walking," Zara would announce, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Does she even own a mirror?" Nadia would add, adjusting her own expensive head wrap. "I would die if I had to dress like that," Bella would declare, and the others would dissolve into cruel laughter that followed Amara like a shadow. But Amara never responded with anger. She would lower her eyes and continue on her way, her water pot balanced perfectly on her head, her heart heavy but unbroken. She greeted every elder she passed. She helped children who fell. She shared the little food she had with those who had even less. Her father had taught her that poverty of the pocket was temporary, but poverty of the spirit was eternal. "Let them laugh, my daughter," Papa Chike would say in the evenings, as they shared their meager meal of cassava and bitter leaf soup. His rough hands would cup her face with such tenderness that Amara's eyes would fill with tears. "Your mother, may her soul rest in peace, she was like you, kind, humble, beautiful in ways these village fools cannot see. You are her daughter, you are my pride. What does it matter if you don't have fine clothes when you have a fine heart?" "But Papa," Amara would whisper, "sometimes I wonder, am I wrong? Should I be more like them?" "Never," Papa Chike's voice would grow firm. "Never trade your humanity for their approval. The path of kindness may be lonely, but it leads somewhere worth going. The path of pride leads only to a beautiful prison." And so Amara continued her solitary walk through life, loving her father, respecting her elders, and waiting, though she didn't know for what. The old woman appeared on a Tuesday, though no one knew where she came from. She materialized on the forest road like morning mist, standing beneath the largest Iroco tree in Adisina, a tree so ancient that the oldest elder's grandfather had known it as old. The tree was sacred, whispered to house spirits. Children were warned never to play near it after sunset. Women would cross themselves when they passed it, muttering prayers of protection. The old woman was bent nearly in half, her wrapper cloth torn and dirty, her hair wild and uncombed. She carried a bundle of firewood that looked too heavy for her frail frame, and she would stand there, swaying slightly, as if waiting. Zara saw her first. She was returning from the stream, her clay pot balanced effortlessly on her head, her body moving with the practiced grace that men wrote bad poetry. She wore her finest wrapper that day, gold threads woven through crimson cloth, and her afro was freshly braided into an elaborate crown. "Please," the old woman's voice cracked like dry leaves. "Please, daughter, help me. This firewood is so heavy and I am so tired." Zara stopped, but not out of compassion. She stopped because the old woman's hand had brushed against her expensive wrapper, leaving a smudge of dirt. What happened next became village legend. Zara's face transformed into something ugly. All her beauty couldn't hide the rot beneath. "You dirty, wretched thing! Do you know how much this cloth cost? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Please, I meant no harm," the old woman began, but she never finished. Zara's hand flew through the air with the force of all her entitled rage, connecting with the old woman's cheek with a crack that echoed through the forest. The old woman crumpled to the ground, her firewood scattering, her body curled in pain. "Touch me again and I'll do worse," Zara spat, and stepped over the fallen woman like she was a fallen branch and continued home without looking back. The old woman lay there for a long moment, then slowly, impossibly slowly, she stood. She gathered her firewood piece by piece, and when she looked at Zara's retreating back, her eyes held something ancient and knowing, a look that would have made Zara's blood run cold if she had bothered to see it. The following week, Nadia encountered the same old woman in the same spot. This time, the woman was trying to lift her water pot, her hands shaking with weakness. "Please, daughter," she called to Nadia. "Please, just help me lift this to my head. I am too weak alone." Nadia, who had heard nothing of Zara's encounter, looked at the filthy old woman with disgust. "You want me to touch that dirty pot? You want me to ruin my hands?" She tilted her own pot deliberately, and water, precious water carried from the stream, poured onto the ground, splashing the old woman. "There, now you have water. Get it yourself." Nadia walked away laughing at her own cruelty, pleased with her wit. The third week brought Bella to the forest road. The old woman was sitting beneath the Iroco tree, seemingly unable to stand. "Please, daughter, help an old woman to her feet. My legs won't work anymore." Bella looked at her with such cold contempt that frost might have formed in the air. "Touch you? I'd rather die." And with deliberate malice, she pushed the old woman, sending her tumbling into the roadside bush, thorns catching in her clothes, cutting her skin. "That's where garbage belongs," Bella said, and continued on her way. One by one, over the following weeks, every beautiful girl in Adisina encountered the old woman, and one by one, they failed a test they didn't know they were taking. Amara met the old woman on a day when her heart was particularly heavy. That morning, Zara and her friends had been particularly cruel, following Amara through the marketplace, loudly discussing how poverty must be a disease, wondering if they could catch it from standing too close. Papa Chike had seen it happen, and for the first time, Amara saw tears in her father's eyes, not for himself, but for the pain his daughter endured. "I'm sorry, Papa," she whispered. "I'm sorry I can't be like them. I'm sorry I embarrass you." "Embarrass me?" Papa Chike gripped her shoulders. "Amara, you are the only thing in this village that gives me pride. Every cruel word they speak tells me I raised you right. They are beautiful on the outside, yes, but you, my daughter, you are beautiful where it matters. In here." He touched her chest above her heart. "Never apologize for being human in a village of pretty statues." So when Amara walked to the stream that afternoon, her eyes were still red from crying, but her spirit was trying to heal. And there, beneath the great Iroco tree, she saw the old woman struggling with a massive bundle of firewood. Amara didn't hesitate. She didn't think about her own clay pot balanced on her head, her own tiredness, or how her shoulders already ached from helping Papa Chike that morning. She saw someone in need, and her heart, that beautiful, unbreakable heart, responded the only way it knew how. "Mama," she called softly, using the respectful term for an elder, "please let me help you." The old woman looked up, and Amara gasped. Her face was bruised, scratched by thorns, marked by violence that made Amara's chest tighten with anger and sorrow. "Who did this to you?" Amara demanded, setting down her pot, immediately moving to help. "Mama, who hurt you?" "It doesn't matter, daughter," the old woman said, and her voice was different now, stronger, clearer, like water running over ancient stones. "The question is, will you help an old woman who has nothing to offer you in return?" "Of course," Amara said, confused by the question. "You don't need to offer me anything. You need help." And so Amara took the heavy bundle of firewood, adding it to her own load. She walked with the old woman slowly, adjusting her pace, asking about her pain, offering her the drinking gourd from her own water pot. She walked the old woman all the way to the edge of the forest, to a path that led deeper into the trees. "This is where I must go alone," the old woman said. "But you, daughter, what is your name?" "Amara, Mama." "Amara," the old woman repeated, and the way she said it made the name sound like a blessing. "You have a kind heart. Your mother will be proud." Amara's eyes widened. "How did you know about my mother?" The old woman smiled, and for just a moment, she didn't look old at all. She looked ageless, powerful, like something from a story. She reached into her torn wrapper and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Take this," she said, "but listen carefully. Do not open it today. Do not use what's inside for 3 days. Can you promise me this?" Amara took the pouch, confused. "But Mama, I helped you because you needed help, not for payment." "I know, daughter. That is exactly why you deserve this. 3 days, remember." And before Amara could say another word, the old woman turned and walked into the forest. Amara watched her go, and she could have sworn, though she told herself later it was just the afternoon light playing tricks, that the old woman seemed to shimmer, becoming transparent like smoke before disappearing entirely near the base of the great Iroco tree. 3 days felt like 3 years. The pouch was heavy in Amara's wrapper, pressing against her like a secret. She wanted to open it. Curiosity burned in her chest like swallowed fire, but she had made a promise. Papa Chike had taught her that a promise made is a promise kept, no matter the cost. On the 3rd night, she waited until Papa Chike was asleep, then carefully untied the leather strings by the light of their small palm oil lamp. Inside was money, not just any money, crisp notes, more than Amara had seen in her entire life. She gasped, her hands shaking. This was enough to buy new clothes, to fix their house, to help Papa Chike stop working so hard. This was enough to change everything. But when she counted it before bed, something impossible happened. The next morning, when she checked the pouch again, there was more money, double what had been there the night before. She counted it 3 times, thinking she'd made a mistake, but no, the money had multiplied like seeds becoming plants, becoming forests. "Papa," she whispered, shaking him awake. "Papa, you need to see this." Papa Chike looked at the money, then at his daughter, then back at the money. His eyes filled with tears. "Where did you get this, Amara? Tell me you didn't steal." "Never, Papa." And she told him everything. The old woman, the firewood, the strange instruction to wait 3 days. Every day, the money increased. It was as if the pouch was blessed, as if kindness itself had been transformed into currency. Within a week, they had enough to rebuild their house. Within 2 weeks, enough to start a small business. Within a month, they were no longer poor, they were wealthy. But more than the money, something else changed. Amara remained exactly who she had always been. Kind, respectful, humble. She bought nice clothes, yes, but she also bought clothes for others who had none. She paid for children to attend school. She hired workers for Papa Chike's new business and paid them fairly. She greeted elders with even more respect than before, because now she understood that fortune was not something you earned through cruelty, but through grace. The village watched in stunned silence as the poor girl they had mocked became the wealthiest young woman in Adisina. I need to thank her, Amara told Papa Chike one evening. I need to find the old woman and thank her properly. She returned to the forest road, to the spot beneath the great Iroco tree where she had met her. She came with gifts, fine cloth, food, money, her arms full of gratitude. But the old woman was not there. Amara waited for hours. She came back the next day, and the next, and the next. She asked every elder in the village if they knew of an old woman living in the forest. Child, the village's oldest elder finally told her, his eyes knowing, no one lives in that forest. No one has for 100 years. That Iroco tree, it is sacred. They say the spirits of kindness and justice live within it, testing the hearts of mortals. They say the tree sends out spirits to walk among us, to see if we are still human or if we have forgotten how. The truth settled over Amara like a gentle rain. The old woman was not human at all. She was a test, a spirit, a force of cosmic justice checking to see if kindness still existed in a village drowning in vanity. And Amara had passed where everyone else had failed. When the news spread, and in a village like Adisina, news spread faster than fire in dry grass, the beautiful girls were struck silent. Zara stood in her family's grand house, surrounded by expensive things that felt hollow. She remembered the slap, the way the old woman had fallen, the smudge of dirt on her wrapper cloth that had washed clean within hours. She had struck a spirit. She had raised her hand against something holy. Nadia couldn't look at water without remembering how she had poured it out in front of an elder. The waste of it, the cruelty of it. Her beautiful face in the mirror looked stranger to her now, like a mask she no longer recognized. Bella couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the old woman tumbling into the thorns, hear her cry of pain. She had pushed an elder, she had pushed a spirit, she had pushed kindness itself into the dirt. One by one they came to Amara's house, no longer a mud hut, but a beautiful compound with room for guests, with space for kindness to grow. They came with shame painted across their beautiful faces. "We are sorry," Zara said, and for the first time in her life, she was not posing, not performing. She was simply terribly honest. "We were cruel to you. We were cruel to her. We were cruel to everyone because we thought beauty gave us permission." "We failed," Nadia whispered, tears tracking through her makeup. "We failed a test we didn't know we were taking." "We would do anything," Bella said, her voice breaking. "Anything to have another chance." Amara looked at them, these girls who had tormented her, who had made her cry, who had made her father weep. She looked at them and she saw not enemies, but people trapped in beautiful prisons of their own making, finally seeing the bars. "The old woman, the spirit, she told me something," Amara said softly. "Kindness isn't a transaction. It's not about getting something in return. It's about being human when it would be easier to be stone." She paused, letting her words settle. "I forgive you, but forgiveness from me isn't what you need. You need to forgive yourselves. You need to learn what I learned, that being beautiful doesn't matter if you're ugly inside, that having everything doesn't matter if you have no humanity, that respect given is respect earned." She looked at each of them in turn. The old woman, the spirit, she's gone, but the test never ended. Every day we are tested. Every person we meet is a chance to choose kindness or cruelty. Every moment is an Iroco tree, asking us who we want to be. The girls left different than they arrived. Some changed permanently, becoming generous where they had been selfish, kind where they had been cruel. Others changed for a while, then slowly forgot, returning to their old ways as their beauty returned to its familiar throne. But they all remembered. They all carried the weight of the failed test, a missed opportunity, a moment when they could have been human and chose instead to be monsters wearing pretty faces. Years later, when Amara was grown with children of her own, she would still walk to the great Iroco tree. She would place offerings there, fruits, flowers, words of thanks whispered to the wind. Thank you, she would say to the tree, to the spirit, to whatever force had tested her and found her worthy. Thank you for teaching me that the greatest wealth is not in our pockets, but in our hearts. Thank you for showing me that kindness, even when it costs us everything, is the only currency that matters. And if you listen very carefully on certain quiet evenings, you could hear the wind rustling through the Iroco tree's leaves, sounding almost like laughter, ancient, knowing, pleased. The spirit was still there, still watching, still testing. And in the village of Adisina, parents began to tell their children the story of Amara and the Iroco tree spirit, of the tests that sorted the kind from the cruel, the human from the hollow. Be like Amara, they would say. When you meet someone in need, when you see suffering, when you have the choice between kindness and cruelty, choose kindness. Choose it even when it costs you. Choose it even when no one is watching. Choose it even when you get nothing in return. Because, they would whisper, glancing toward the forest where the great Iroco tree stood sentinel, you never know when you're being tested. You never know when an old woman is really a spirit, when a moment of cruelty will echo forever, when a moment of kindness will change everything. And in the end, the only test that matters is the one we give ourselves. When we could be anything, will we choose to be kind? The Iroco tree still stands in the forest outside Adisina, ancient and knowing, and on certain days, if you look carefully, you might see an old woman beneath its branches, waiting to see if the next generation has learnt what the last one failed to teach, that beauty fades, wealth scatters, but kindness plants seeds that bloom forever.